Welcome to Nutrition Shop Radio, the health talk radio station of the Nutrition Shop, where we discuss current health trends, nutrition and fitness tips, pet health, and more. To be notified of our latest or upcoming episodes, make sure you bookmark or subscribe to our Blog Talk channel, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. If you would like more information on one of our shows, the products we stock at our store, or would like to book a health consultation with us, give us a call at 678-228-8900, or visit our website, which can be found in the description for each of our episodes. Please note that the information you hear on Nutrition Shop Radio is intended to be educational, and not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Individual concerns should be addressed to your primary health provider. Now, it's time for Dr. Len or one of his affiliate health professionals to talk about today's health topic.
Testing. That's funny. I got you, Brian. Yep. Okay. That's funny. I unmuted Dr. Lynn. Forgot to unmute myself. Here we go with another rocky start. All right. Well, how you doing today?
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect. We're okay.
Excellent.
We're just
all right. We're good.
What I want to know is, as we start this show, and you come up with this idea, diets of the 50s.
Yeah.
Are you trying to date me as being a child of the 50s?
No,
actually. I mean, you're asking me to talk about the diets of the 50s. Now, granted, I was born in the 50s.
I didn't know that, actually. I picked the 50s because I know that now, see, I'm actually a huge fan of the 30s. I absolutely love the 30s. I love the style. I love the movies. I love the dress. I love everything about the 30s. But looking back on things, I was trying to pick an era actually that had some stranger foods in it. Now granted, 30s and 40s did have kind of some weird foods. That's when a lot of our canned meats and a lot of our other stuff started coming about. But when I was doing research into some old diets, and I saw the 50s and 60s, not just the 50s. This is more like the 50s, 60s, maybe a little 70s. But when I started looking into the diets of the 50s and 60s, there's only one word that kept going through my head, and it was why. Why did these foods exist? I can understand why they don't exist now. So I thought it might be kind of fun to go back to the 50s and 60s, and I honestly did not have any clue if you would remember that, if you were a child of that era. I didn't know that, so I just picked that because it had some of the strangest foods I'd seen. So I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about that.
Well, yes. I was born in the early 50s, and yes, I was born into a interesting family setup with raised by my Italian grandmother, who, again, keeping in mind in the 50s, were still the area that we were raised in, Pittsburgh, was still highly populated by immigrants. So, my grandparents came over right in the very beginning of World War II. And so, we're looking at them coming over in the 30s and trying to establish themselves here in the country. My Polish side, my dad's side, again, my grandfather was a victim of World War II. He was in the concentration camps in Poland and managed to escape and managed to come to this country. So the Polish side, I didn't really know much of. My grandfather died when I was still relatively young on the Polish side. So I was pretty much raised on the Italian side. So again, coming over as immigrant families, and this was a big part of the 50s. When I think of your topic, the diets of the 50s, the first thing that came to mind was cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that you see if you watch any of the TV shows that are still out there in black and white from the 50s is, even I remember Johnny Carson's show, looking at that, and everybody smoked. You look at anybody They smoked on airplanes. You still see some of the older airplanes still have ashtrays on them. Smoking was a big deal. Now, I find it intriguing that, post-World War II, coming back, we looked at prosperity. The country was booming after the 40s, after World War II, and the economy was great in the 50s, and it was the dawn of comfort foods. We all thought we were kings. And we started, as you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago, we started eating like kings. Not that we ate expensive foods, but, if I'm thinking of a few of the terms that deal with the 50s, I think of the word casseroles.
Right, yeah.
I think of the word meatloaf.
Yeah.
I think of the word bologna, because the 50s were the dawn of lunch meats. And again, lunch meats became very popular because everybody was working at a pack of lunch. The other thing that came out in the 50s, which was huge, was Spam. Yeah. Now, granted, Spam came out during World War II, and it was a food for the vets. But then it went from a food for vets into, this is something that I think the people that didn't have a lot of money yet were just starting their families could actually afford. So when you look at the foods, you look at smoking, not healthy. You look at drinking. Alcohol was a big part of the 50s and 60s. And then you look at the food choices, which were highly fat-laden. Right. And, now I'm going to say this and say the intriguing thing is, now my father passed away very early. My mother lived to be 94. My grandmother on the Italian side lived to be 92. My grandfather on the Italian side lived to be 91. They ate horribly, for the most part, but they lived a long life. Why? Because they still, even though these were some of the foods of the 50s, the other thing that came in the 50s, which is making a resurgent right now, was called the Victory Garden. Is that in the 50s, if you bought a home and you were just getting started, a new house, whatever, you always put aside a little bit of an area in your backyard or to the side where you had your own little homemade garden. And you grew your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your peppers. And so even though we were eating fatty foods, we still had an overabundance of fresh vegetables that were still making their way to the table. So I guess that's my opening comment. I'm sure you have a lot more, but I thought stroganoff, I thought meatloaf, I thought casseroles were like a big deal. And even one more thing that came out in the 50s was, came out actually in the 40s, was the dawn of deep frying foods, the fatty deep fries. And I can't remember exactly when, but wasn't the 50s when McDonald's started?
I'd have to look it up, but you're pretty close. I'm thinking it's 40s, but I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, might be. But anyway, so we'll say the 50s McDonald's prospered, for probably it was a 12-cent or a 15-cent hamburger. But again, we started to get into fast food at that time.
Well, something else, too, that I found in this research that might kind of strike a memory with you. And I don't have an exact timetable on all this stuff, but other than this is foods, literally everything from like the 30s to the 60s is a pretty broad range, but nonetheless, you might remember some of this, either hearing about it or you may have even experienced it yourself. I'm not sure. But one of the things I've come across a lot in the research is the word that comes to my mind is experimentation. My gosh, man, there are so many bizarre in these old cookbooks. I'd be like, I think most people today, especially most youth today, would look at this and go, oh, it just the thing that got me was apparently one of the big discoveries, and this I'm expecting a good answer from you on this one, but a big discovery was Jell-O. Oh my dear gosh, the freaking recipes for Jell-O! Like some of the recipes I found, it shouldn't even. Those ingredients should not exist with Jell-O.
Well, I can't believe you're saying that, because it didn't even cross my mind. But growing up again on the Italian side, we all got together. And I got to say this, one of the positives of growing up in the 50s and 60s was still the family time on the weekends. That families still got together. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have places that pulled us apart, but we still got together over a meal, either on Saturday or Sunday or both days, at usually one of the grandparents' house. And my aunt, she was single and lived with my grandmother. She had every one of those Jell-O molds, those fancy little molds, and she would make that green Jell-O, and she would put pears in it and cherries in it and all kind of different fruit in it and try to make it a pseudo healthy thing. And then, we started floating around all kind of different things in Jell-O. It's just like, there's your dessert. Let's just throw something into there.
Oh no, I'm not even talking dessert. I'll read over a couple of these recipes I found, and it's just, not all of it is Jell-O, but I'm just kind of reading through a list here. One of them is called Monterey Souffle Salad, which apparently is like, it's like, imagine a vegetable stew. Okay, it says there's olives, celery, cucumber, pimento, onion, etc. And what they did was they took Hellman's mayo and used that as a base with Jell-O to make like this white Jell-O, and they mixed all the vegetables in with it. So speaking of your casseroles, that was one of them. That one got me. This one really got me. This is an really old Christmas advertisement. All right, you'll get a kick out of this. It's an old advertisement for something called a peppermint popcorn tree, which I'm not going to, there's a lot of ingredients. I'm not going to get into it all, but the advertisement says Cairo syrup adds a wholesome kind of sweetness that is easy to digest. Now, anyone that hears that now is going to be like, wait a minute, did you just say Cairo as in like corn syrup? And we wonder why there's such an oversaturation of it now. That's the type of ads that we had, once upon a time.
Oh my God.
7-Up mayo Jell-O salad. I kid you not. 7-Up mayonnaise Jell-O salad is one of the recipes in this cookbook. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh my Lord. No, but let me just say this in general terms. This is coming from a guy that's been trained me in clinical nutrition. We look at that. We look at the people that were born and raised in the 50s and ate that kind of nonsense and ate casseroles and did this. Okay, so these are people that are in their 60s, maybe early 70s. And you look at their health, okay, just in general terms. Even though they came from, maybe they smoked back in the day, maybe they drank back in the day, maybe they ate all this garbage food back in the day. But there was still something with the less amount of stress in their lives coming through the 50s and 60s versus, I mean, granted, I was a child of the Vietnam War, and I was, I had to go through the draft and the whole 9 yards and the risk factors of being hauled after high school over into Vietnam. Thank God I didn't have to, but I stayed 1A, I had to go in for my physicals all the time. So, that level of stress, because I got a military deferment from being in medical. I was in pharmacy school, so I had a medical deferment to keep me in school, but I could be called up at any time if they needed somebody here stateside. So there was the stress levels. But as far as our health goes, the people that I know, my friends that are 60s and 70s and on up, now granted, it's not everywhere, but compared to the health of today's generation, let's say those in their 20s and 30s. Even though there's more exercise now and there's more good food available and there's more of this and there's more of that, healthcare nowadays is 10 times more utilized than it was for us. We had to pay as we went. Now everybody's got insurance and they do co-pays. But I'm telling you that the health of today's world, the rates of cancer of today's world compared to my generation are dramatically higher. So, even though we came from the casserole generation and the Jell-O generation,
and the recipe
okay.
I just saw, which is, believe it or not, bananas and ham hollandaise. You heard that one correct as well.
Oh, God.
All right, so enough of the funny recipes. There's a lot more in there. They had me chuckling pretty good. But all right, so one of the things that and I'm sure a lot of our listeners want to hear your opinion on is, given all these really bizarre recipes, and these, like I said, are between we'll say 40s to 60s, because I think that was the bulk of what I was looking up. So given all that, here's one question I'd like to try to address to you first, and then we'll kind of go on from there, I guess. But do you think, and this is based on common debate current day, do you think that the rate of cancer and all the different statistics that we have in today's time are accurate compared to what would have been accounted for, say, 40, 50, 60s? What I'm saying, put another way, is that do you think that the records that would have been kept back then are accurate enough to be able to compare them to now, to say, yes, there was a definitive difference between something, as we say, as you say, some sort of difference between what was done then as opposed to now?
That's an excellent question, and I'll jump ahead to when I was in college. I was in college in pre-pharmacy. I started out in the field of biology, so I'm 2 years into college, and I'll never forget, on a Sunday afternoon, I just called, because we didn't have cell phones now. I went to a payphone, called home just to see what was going on, and I got my mother, who said my dad was just rushed to the hospital. Now, my dad was working basically 3 jobs. He was a barber, he was working as a bartender, and he was working cleaning buildings, just so that there would be enough money to put me through college. I was working full-time all the way through college as well. Well, he was rushed to the hospital. Now, back in the day, you went to the doctors only if you were ill. They didn't do blood work very often. But all I remember is they had my dad on a prescription drug called papaverine, which was actually a natural ingredient for circulation that was put into a prescription drug. It was a little, I clearly remember, it's a brown and clear capsule with little white beads in it. And I kept asking my dad, I saw him take it every morning, just like one of those. And I said, "What's that for?" And he says, "Oh, it's for my heart." That's what they said. It was for his heart. Now that I realize from a pharmacy perspective, that was early looking at circulation in and around the heart muscle. It was early. I mean, it's not even used anymore, but my dad died of an abdominal aneurysm. It blew. Technology to actually do this. So in answer to your question, we rarely, if ever, even check cholesterol levels. We rarely, if ever, even did blood work. We rarely, if ever, would even become somebody that was diagnosed with cancer unless it was really obvious. So even back in those days, even though rates of cancer even though they smoked, the rates of cancer weren't really that bad yet, because I think it took a few more generations for it to really catch up. But just like you say, the medical system has evolved dramatically to the point where we all go at least once a year to get a physical. We all get checked out, and some of the diagnostic tools we have nowadays are so much better. Mm-hmm. But I will say this from one perspective: growing up with my grandparents, my Italian grandparents, after every meal, we got two things happened. After every meal, we had a salad. We didn't have a salad before the meal. We had a salad after the meal, which now, in retrospect, looking at it from a clinical nutrition standpoint, was the better way to do it. Putting that fiber in at the end of the meal rather than fill you up at the beginning, the fiber at the end of the meal helped you digest your meal better. Now, the other thing that we got typically on the weekends is my grandmother would give us a piece of chewing gum. Wow, there's a big, there's dessert for you. But we had this stuff called Beeman's chewing gum. And I think it's still around, and it was Beeman's gum that had pepsin in it. It was a digestive enzyme. So my grandmother didn't know that. She said, give all my family a piece of gum. We thought it was a treat, but it helped us to digest our food better. So even though the food wasn't the best, we got it in and out of the system. We got the maximum out of it because we were utilizing a piece of chewing gum that had a digestive enzyme in it. Now, in today's world, I think the bulk of the people are having digestive problems with their meals, And almost everybody is in need of a digestive enzyme to help them digest their food better.
Oh, yeah, and I'm definitely going to be touching on that topic in just a minute. Before I do that, though, thought you might find it interesting. Your insight, I think, might be better than you realize. I just looked up deaths by cancer in the U.S. from 1950 to 2018, which was the last census, last survey they did. This is per 100,000 population. This is on the cancer.gov site for any who wants to look this up to see their own statistics. But from 1950, which is where this thing starts, through about 1970, it looks like, so 20-year span-ish, it stayed right at about 190, all right? And it slowly goes up, believe it or not, up to 1990, it looks like. Between 90 and 95 was the all-time highest for deaths by cancer in the U.S., ranging around the 210, all right? That's at 1990, so it actually went up past 1950 and started to go up. Now, at that point, from about 95, it very slowly started creeping back. All right, that being said, it wasn't until 2003, between 2003 and 4, believe it or not, that we just started to get back down towards the statistic of 50 to 70. What that means is that I told you it's about a 190 out of 100,000. It went back down from that all-time high in 1990. It took another 10 years-ish, 2003, 2004, to hit the same statistics as it was back in the 50s. Now, from there, yes, it has gone down a little further. In 2018, which is the last statistic that this survey did, it was at 149, which is only, I say only, but 150, so it's 40 less than what it was in the 50s. So the reason I wanted to read that off, not just to confirm your own insights, but to kind of demonstrate what Lynn has been talking about already between diets and the various trends that we've experienced over the years. Now that you've heard those statistics, would you say that pretty much confirms what you were just talking about, or you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it does. And then as you were giving those statistics, right at that peak in the 90s, I'm not sure of this again. I'm just going off the top of my head. But I think that's just about the time when they started to ban cigarettes. Okay, so cigarette smoking was still a biggie all the way through the 80s, and I think almost up to the beginning of the 90s. Then the price started going up, and I think all the lawsuits started flying around, R.J. Reynolds and these companies, and it was stopped. You couldn't smoke in various issues, and you got forced outside. I think a lot of people then made that decision to stop smoking because I think lung cancer rates were probably part of that contributing factor. So I really think there was two things. Number one, you had options to better foods and better choices. But the other problem that I think peaked in the 90s was stress. And I think if we're looking for a rebound time here in 2021, going through 2020, which was the year from hell, is that stress levels have just like blown us all away. And I just got done doing a consult with somebody who's probably listening right now, go unnamed, that kept himself in shape all his life, married, 2 kids, working in an office closed, working from home, packed on 20 pounds. Blood sugar's out of control. Okay, and basically by self-admittance at home, started eating poorly. So, there's still this issue that I said, stress is a big deal, which is why I'm a big, big believer in adrenal extracts. Our prep called Adrenal Health, I think, is just amazing for helping with that. And I really think getting some digestive support and stop buying this stuff. I mean, I got to stress this over and over again because when I was talking to him, he says, I get hungry around noon and I'd go to the closet and take out a bag of chips. Well, don't buy them. Leave them on the shelf.
Remove the temptation,
Yeah, last week we did that list of the top foods from grocery stores. And, and when you see Coke and Pepsi are still number one, don't buy it. If you want to keep it out of the house, have it on a rare occasion when you go out, but don't buy it. And I think 2 big points here. I think now in today's world we have access to digestive enzymes, and I'm not talking Prilosec, omeprazole, protonics, those things. I think they're dangerous. I think they're accumulating to some major problems down the road. But I think the use of digestive enzymes for the entire family, a prep like Probezymes, which are chewable, that even kids can use, I think are wonderful for adhering to good digestive health. And I think our choices, I think we do have choices here. I feel like I'm almost a spokesperson for Aldi's. I mean, I think they've done it well. Whole Foods done it well. Mm-hmm. Where you do have choices that can be reasonably priced, and you can assure your health and stay away from the nonsense of the 90s. You know what's really amazing now? You can go to various restaurants nowadays, and they'll have sections of menus called comfort food. And you know what's in that section of comfort food?
I thought you were going the other way with 50s. That. I thought you were going to say they had like sodium-free type section.
No, they have food from the 50s now that says, on a special occasion, I'm going out for dinner tonight, and I'm going to have meatloaf casserole,
Oh, man. Wow. Oh. Well, to quickly, before we go into the next
can I give you one more thing? Can I give you one more thing? Growing up on the Italian side, and we didn't have a lot of money, honestly. I'm not pulling anybody's sympathy, but we didn't. And one of the staples that we had with virtually every meal was cornmeal that was cooked on the stove into a form with, I think, Karo syrup or corn syrup or whatever, and you blended this together with butter, and you made this stuff called polenta. And we had it as a side dish, this big scoop of mush on your plate with whatever you had. And then if there was any left over, we took it off the plate, and they would deep fry it, and you'd make a dessert out of it. You'd have sweet polenta. So it was interesting. This was poor man's food because it was cheap to make. Intriguingly, I've gone out to some very, very, very high-end Italian restaurants here in Tampa, and one of those that I went to had as its main dish a polenta pizza. It was like they put polenta down, and then they put your sauce and your stuff on the top of it and baked it. And it was a delicacy. So I'm thinking, oh, my God, what used to be a poor man's food is now looked at as a delicacy. So I find that intriguing as well.
Yeah. When you said that, it kind of reminded me of an funny old joke I remember hearing about fancy food, so to speak. Ritzy food. It's the junk parts of the animal, like the caviar and what is it? I can't think of what it's called right now, but the entrails, and things like that. I'm thinking that's the first thing went through my head. Yeah, when you mentioned that.
And you're a Southern boy. Talk to us about grits. I mean, you do a lot of cooking. Do you ever utilize grits in any of the meals that you put together?
I'm a Southern boy? No, I'm a Yankee.
No, I know. You're not.
Yeah. My grits are cream of wheat, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are going, "Oh, I can't." I'm the same way about grits. I tell people that I can't eat grits because it's crunchy water. It's just, I can't do it. I've tried. I can't stomach it. Cream of wheat, little to no sugar, iced tea. I don't have a whole lot of sugar in my diet, actually. In fact, just recently, to kind of help promote my cognitive health, I've almost cut all sugar out of my diet altogether, outside of natural things, like sugars in vegetables and fruits. Other than that, I don't use processed sugar hardly at all anymore. But we're kind of going off on another thing there. Let me mention real quickly, your insight to the smoking thing is not far off. I just looked it up. The legislation actually went into full effect June 30th, 1995, but they started the bans and the heavy restrictions on smoking and things like that in 92. So you were pretty close. It was a little after the 90s, but I think, as you already mentioned, the 90s were kind of peaking. Everyone realized that, and it took a couple of years for them to kind of get things enacted and slow down on that. Yeah. That was
the
on
intriguing
the
thing that I would ask you, since you've been doing most of the research on this, did you find anything that was a staple or a dietary trend of the 50s that has stood the test of time?
Oh, yeah. There's been a few things.
That's still being utilized today and is still seen as fairly healthy.
Oh, no, that part I can't. The one I was going to say is spam. That's something that's transcended time. You mentioned that earlier. But another one though that can be healthy, and that's going to be true for a lot of these different dishes in that era. Meatloaf. Okay, now meatloaf can go one of two ways. You can either pick the fattiest, nastiest meat possible, and I say nastiest. That's subjective, I know. But fattiest meat, because everyone knows that, the more fat that's in a food, the tastier it is, because that's just how fat is. So you do like an 80-30 type meat, and you make a meatloaf out of it, as opposed to, say, a 90-10 or a 93-7, something like that type of meat, or even a wild game meat, which is my preference. There's going to be differences there. So a person could say, on a very narrow track, that meatloaf is bad for you. Yes and no. It depends on who cooks it, where, what goes into it, all those things. So if you do just a base meat, nothing added to it, 80-20 meat. I think I said 80-30 before. 80-20 meat, 70-30, something like that. You don't put any veggies in it. You don't put anything else in it. And then you do something like what my dad does. He's from the Midwest. It almost makes me gag a little bit when I see him do this, but he'll take ketchup, brown sugar to it of all things, and sweeten it even further, and then use it as a dressing. Oh my gosh, no. But so on top of a nasty, fatty meatloaf, he adds what I call sugary death, or diabetic meatloaf. No harsh pun intended there. I'm just, for his purposes, that's why I call it, because I keep telling my dad he's risking diabetes for all the sugar he adds to his foods. But I'm on the opposite end of that. I like game meats, or something like a 90-10, 93-7 type meat, real lean, turkey if possible. That's good too. And then load it up with veggies, green pepper, red pepper, orange pepper, all the wonderful peppers, onions, all that good fun stuff. And then for the love of all that is good and delicious available to us, no dressing. Please, no dressing. If there's any dressing, it's probably like a really, really light brown gravy made from a vegetable stock or something like that. That's about as far as I'll go with that. So there's two sides to that coin. But yeah, no, there's lots of recipes I found that have transcended time, and depending on where you live, you may have different variations. I saw one recently, actually, that kind of reminded me of my childhood, something I grew up on a little bit. My mom makes it. Now, she always called it 5-cup salad, all right? And when I looked up the recipe, I was like, wow, that looks familiar. What is that? And then I realized that ambrosia, as I'm sure a lot of you guys your memories are being triggered right now, ambrosia is what my mom calls 5-cup salad. And I was like, oh, that's where that came from. So now she put a spin on it, of course. She doesn't use what was the base for that originally? Was it mayonnaise? Because mayonnaise is used for a lot of stuff back then. Yeah. Okay, she doesn't do mayonnaise. She does a lean cottage cheese. I know that sounds strange, but she does a lean cottage cheese and all the other ingredients. The coconut and the orange and all other stuff. And I think for the sake of my dad, because my dad has a really strong sweet tooth, she'll put the maraschino cherries in there for him. But she knows that I hate it, so instead of the cherries, she'll put almonds in there for me, something along those lines. But so that struck a memory with me. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of things that have transcended time and have been carried over to today with little variations here or there. How about you, Lynn? Can you think of anything that's transcended over?
Honestly, coming from living in Atlanta for those many years, 13, 14 years, breakfast in the 50s was primarily eggs in a meat. And, that was the tradition that started post-World War II. So I think that's transcended times. I think still, when people say we're going out to eat breakfast, typically eggs are a part of that.
I agree. I saw a lot of those.
Waffles and things like that really came into being in the 50s and 60s, and I think they're still a part of, I think it's transcended into like Pop-Tarts and garbage like that.
Yeah.
I think chili is another one that came as a post-World War II thing that is still there, and you and I have had fun with chili, the ways that we put together various turkey-based chilies, which are fabulous. You know, I'm just trying to think what else. You know, you can almost look like the meals of the 50s were keto diets. You know, you think about it, the keto diet got to be this big thing. People were losing weight. And you really look back at the people in the 50s. You know, you look at the pictures of the guys working on construction and you know, you don't see a lot of obese individuals, even though they were eating a ton of fat. You know, so I got to say, if something transcended, I would think the keto diet and forms of that have transcended up till today.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I was just looking up some of the different things that have transcended, curious myself, just to see what else pops up. Chili is definitely one of them. Egg salad's another one. I didn't think about that. Egg salad has transcended. Split pea soup. Pinwheels.
Tuna noodle casserole. Noodle casserole was another one, yeah.
Oh, a whole lot of tuna stuff. Oh, yeah, definitely. Cucumber hors d'oeuvre type deals. And it's interesting you mentioned it. Now, let me read this article I found. It's real interesting. I'm not going to read them all. There's a whole lot here in this on this page. But it says, at the opening here, it says, who can forget the towering Jell-O molds Grandma used to serve, or the tuna casserole that made an appearance at every church potluck? There was Spam, Chex Mix, and pineapple too. Today we're going to answer a question: what food was popular in the 50s? All right, that's how this starts. And I scroll down. This is one of the different pages I found that talk about this. And here's something that's kind of funny. All right, so I scroll down to where it says dinners, and they have different things. They've got appetizers, they've got desserts, they've got different sections. The section I'm reading right now says dinners, and in this section it says there's no such thing as the keto diet in the 50s. Meat and potatoes reigned supreme. You'll find hearty dishes like Salisbury steak, another one I forgot that I do enjoy occasionally, beef stroganoff, and meatloaf on a 50s dinner menu, plus scrumptious sides. Casseroles were also popular, particularly those featuring seafood or ham. And it goes off into another tangent to describe all that stuff. But it's interesting to me. You just mentioned the keto diet, and they just touched on the exact same topic. So I think you and whoever wrote this are in agreement on that one.
I agree.
Yeah. So now, something I was thinking about too that might be a fun transition into maybe next week's topic is talking about another interesting subject around this topic that has been a heated debate for as long as I can remember. All right. Now, I went to, I went to school for nutrition about 20 years ago, but that's kind of accurate, kind of not. Let me rephrase it. I started my pursuit in nutrition about 20 years ago, because prior to that, it was survival training, living off the land, wilderness survival, EMT type work, and that kind of transitioned into nutrition and fitness. But one of the mentors I had back in the day was Dr. Wheel, and I've mentioned him before, working out of the University of Arizona. And one of the things that he touched on, including, the meals and diets of the 50s, 40s, 60s, just all the diets that we've had in years prior, is enzymes. Now, our audience has heard you talk about that. They've heard me talk about that, and in prior episodes, including this one. Now, to kind of elaborate on that a bit, back in the 50s, you said that each person had their own garden, therefore they had their own supply of fresh foods and veggies, kind of going off of the fresh enzymes topic we talked about last week, and I think even the week prior. And one of the most common things I've heard come up in clinical, well, I start to say clinical nutrition, but nutrition as a general rule, is the role enzymes play in a person, not just through their life, but through the lives of future generations. And you probably already know where I'm going with this. My question to you is, how do you think the diets of the 50s, all the comfort foods aside, talking about strictly the different diseases that would have existed then, the numbers we've already talked about, and then the fresh food diets they had, meaning they got more enzymes than most of us get now. And we already mentioned that the fast food started taking hold about that time, and obviously it's had a lot of years to develop. So taking into account how drastically the diet has changed, more fast food now, less fresh food. You guys had more fresh foods when you were younger as opposed to what I've had growing up. So centered around the enzymes that we've been getting less and less of in each generation, do you think that's played a part to any degree in the waning health of generations from the 50s to now?
It may be the number one reason, quite honestly. When you talk about asking your children, like nowadays, what's your favorite vegetable? And they say ketchup.
Or pizza.
That like yeah. they just, too often are looking at that. So, I think the enzymes are a crucial factor, that if you eat food as God put it on the face of the earth, you eat a raw carrot, you eat a raw piece of celery, you eat a peach. Like I just stopped yesterday, my wife and I went for a ride. There's probably about 8 miles from here, an amazing farmer's market. Okay. And there's an area here in Florida called Plant City. Okay. It's right in the center part of the state. And it's where a great percentage, like if you're buying strawberries that are from the United States, they're either coming from California or here. And I think like close to 90% of the watermelons in the United States are coming from here. So they had just pulled up a truckload of watermelons, seedless watermelons. And they had just brought in freshly picked peaches and beefsteak tomatoes. So you know what I had for dinner last night? A beefsteak tomato sandwich. Just sliced tomato and I bought a homemade sourdough bread that I bought at the farmer's market. So yeah, I think you look at things like sourdough bread and some of the things that are naturally made with enzymes and naturally soured in that way. And the fact that if you could eat more raw, fresh vegetables and fruits, the enzymes were there. If you're buying things frozen, canned, etc., or processed at a fast food place, the enzymes are gone. They're just cooked out of it. The other thing that I just brought up, just for example, and you had mentioned fast food, a McDonald's website in the mid 50s, 55, 56, a hamburger was 3.9 ounces. Today, 12 ounces. It's almost 4 times as big. French fries. McDonald's French fries, medium order French fries in the 50s, 2.4 ounces. Today, 6.7 ounces. So we could say we're still eating a medium size order of French fries, but it's 3 times as much. And again, did our appetite go up 3 times as much? Or is it the fact that we have such sluggish digestion that the 2.4 ounces of French fries wouldn't fill us up? It took a lot more than that to keep us happy. And we start having more and more people with weight issues. So, yeah, I think it's a well done point, Brian, that when you cook the enzymes out of stuff, you suffer. And if you're not eating fresh, you're suffering.
Okay. Oh, good answer, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. All right, so let's see.
I think we beat this one pretty good. I'm telling you, this is. So. I didn't think this subject was really that popular, but I think there's a lot of people that are still eating like the 50s and are still
where I want
looking
to go
at food like the 50s. Yeah,
right.
And I think some of the things we learned from the 50s, I think can still be instilled into diets today.
Well, that, and also, as you already mentioned, a lot of this stuff is comfort food for us, especially those growing up. I can think back to when I was a kid, and I'm going to have a different comfort food, of course. I grew up a little different. My comfort food is Mediterranean. It's not just the way I eat, but my family, we were friends with a lot of Greek families where we used to live. So I grew up eating a lot of Greek food. So my comfort food is called pasticcio. Okay, it's like it's not the healthiest stuff in the world, but you can make it healthy, kind of like the meatloaf debate, where you use leaner meats and you use the typical spices. You don't put as much sugar in there as the traditional Greek recipe might have, et cetera, et cetera. So there are healthier ways to make it. I love moussaka. It's one of my favorites as well. I love grape leaves, like stuffed grape leaves. So I do have some of my comfort foods, but it's different than other people. But nonetheless, it still fills me with nostalgia. So I can understand why a person might have that same feeling towards their 50s foods. But I think the point I'm trying to make, and then Lynn, I think, or you can elaborate on this if you want, but the point I'm trying to make is that I'm not suggesting a person give up on their comfort foods by any means. That's not what this talk is about. It's more like kind of having some fun, reflecting on the way we used to eat as a society years ago, and then ways we can either adapt it now or even evolve it now to fit the type of diet and lifestyle we need today without losing too many of those roots. And I go back to what I was talking about with the pasticcio, where I can still enjoy that. I just need to choose leaner meats, even turkey, for all intents and purposes, to ensure that I'm getting a good, healthy diet, but at the same time, I can still enjoy those comfort foods on occasion.
Exactly. I think that's a point well taken, and I think it's a lesson that we all could learn. And I really think if anybody that hears today's show, seriously, get online and look at some of the recipe books from the 50s. You don't want to use them all. I think if you look at some of the principles of the 50s, even the 60s, and added them to your diet, you're going to look at your kids and probably see this almost like a treat. Here's something different, and we can take something different in and try to cook it in such a way that it's healthy. And I think right now, Brian, we need to make a point. If you're stuck and you really, I can't read a recipe book, I can't come up with any ideas, my kids don't like to eat this, call and set up a time with Brian. He comes from a chef background and nutrition background. Perhaps you need to chat with me first and then with Brian and let him come up with some recipe ideas for you.
Yeah, get Lynn to help you with the lifestyle, and then I'll help you with the refining of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's well taken. Call our office at 678-228-8900 and just call and say, I want to set up a time. I need to get my family's health back. Here we are in August. Kids are going back to school now, and we're struggling. We're struggling. My kids aren't healthy. I'm paranoid about COVID. I don't know what to do.
I can help you guys.
I
can also help you guys learn to cook on the go, like cook fast-paced type stuff, because I know a lot of people are on the go these days, so I can help you learn to cook healthy in short amounts of time.
So I think that's well taken. And again, Brian, why don't you tell our individuals, our listeners, how they can go back and listen to some of these past shows, and a little bit more about our website. I think before we go, I think we need to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, sure. You guys can go to our website and look underneath the About Us or the events. I have to double check that. Let's see, the Nutrition Shop. Underneath the About Us, yeah. You'll see live shows under the About Us, and our shows and live shows both, and you can get information from this talk show plus any others that we do under those sections or categories. And then we're going to be announcing each week, both on Facebook and on here, kind of a general idea of what it is we're going to do next. And if you guys would like more information, feel free to give us a call or just shoot us an email through our website, which you can find on this episode's description, and ask us about maybe even a topic you'd like us to discuss. We're completely open to topics or suggestions that you guys might have that you'd like to hear us debate on or research on for you.
You know what? I think what I had said when you grabbed me today and said, "Do you remember what we're talking about today?" And I said, "How about next week we do this? Let's talk about getting into an exercise program." Getting in to start out with the basics of walking. And let's talk about what you can do stretching-wise, exercise-wise, supplementally to support ligaments, tendons, joints, cramps, all those subjects that sort of are excuses why I'm not doing it. Let's see if we can't dispel and call next week's show no excuses. Let's see if we can get you off your duff and moving, as God said, God created us to move. Let's see if we can get you moving.
Sounds excellent.
Yeah, because I have another consult here starting in about 4 minutes, so I got to get running. Appreciate this, Brian. I think it was a great show. I think it needs to be shared with others. And I'll talk to you real soon, okay?
Sounds excellent. All right. You have a great day.
Take care now.
And I guess that wraps up for our show this week, folks. We appreciate you listening in, as always, and we're hoping to get a new number soon, so that way those of you who want to call in and ask us questions at the end of our show can do so. And if there are any questions that you have for one of our shows, feel free to send us a message on our website or through Facebook, as we are listing our shows on Facebook each week. So we're hoping to add some more to our website as well to allow you guys to comment on some of our shows. And, of course, you're welcome to add your own suggestions there as well. So we thank you for tuning in. We look forward to having you guys with us next week. God bless. Have a great day.